There's a wonderful Bible story that I think all of us can relate to. And this occurs in Mark 9:14 to 24. It's the story of the healing of a boy with an unclean spirit. And it says the following: When they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them, and some scribes arguing with them. When the whole crowd saw him, they were immediately overcome with awe, and they ran forward to greet him. He asked them, "What are you arguing about with them?" Someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought you my son. He has a spirit that makes him unable to speak, and whenever it seizes him, it dashes him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to cast it out, but they could not do so." He answered them, "You faithless generation, how much longer must I be among you? How much longer must I put up with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him, and when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground, rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked the father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. It has often cast him into the fire and into water to destroy him. But if you are able to do anything, have pity on us and help us." And Jesus said to him, "If you are able, all things can be done for the one who believes." And immediately the father of the child cried out, "I believe. Help my unbelief." And Jesus goes on to heal the boy. Now, this is a wonderful story, not so much of the healing miracle of Jesus, but the story of the man declaring, "I do believe, but please help that part of me that doesn't believe." Juan Enrique Toro greeting you on this wonderful day, thanking you for your presence with us on the channel, thanking you for the thumbs up, wonderful. Those of you who want to keep involved, the subscription really helps to promote the channel. And of course, to all of you making the donations, thank you so much. So like I say, I think all of us can relate to this story of the man who has this urgent need. His son, his precious son, is having a very hard time. Seeks help from the disciples. The disciples aren't able to do anything, and Jesus comes along and he says, "Please help us." And Jesus is a bit annoyed here. He seems like he's having kind of a hard day. He kind of insults not only the disciples, but he also insults the man. The man says, "Do you think you could help us?" And he says, "What do you mean? You know, of course I can help you. Everything is possible to them that believe." And he throws faith upon the man. And the man, is kind of reacts and he says, "Yes, I do believe. But help my unbelief. Help that part of me that doesn't believe." And I think, like I say, all of us can relate to this. Because at some level we might declare ourselves to be believers. We believe in that invisible reality that we call God or universal presence or whatever we call it. We believe in that. But there are times in which we come up against the wall of our own belief. Our faith doesn't seem strong enough or deep enough. And so we call out, "Help that part that doesn't believe." That's what I'd like to address today. And the way I'd like to begin to frame this exploration comes from the first 3 steps of the 12 steps of recovery. You know that Alcoholics Anonymous made famous this 12-step process to recovery or of recovery. And the first 3 steps, to me, all the steps are wonderful, but the first 3 steps really put it into context of exactly, what needs to happen here. So let me review those with you in light of this idea of how we can improve our own faith, okay? So step 1 of the 12-step process, I admit that I am powerless over my emotions and that my life has become unmanageable. Right? This is the first step. It's a recognition of where we are. Very important in all of our spiritual journey. Wherever we're going to end up going to, if we're going to increase our faith in God, we need to recognize where we are right now. And we recognize that, yes, what we've done so far is just not working. And we're actually powerless over those parts, right? And my life, as a result of my misinterpretation of life, of the laws of the universe, of God, has just become unmanageable. So it's a recognition, it's an acceptance, it's admitting that we have a problem. Right away, that to me is a representation of high consciousness. Goes on to step 2. I came to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. Here we are acknowledging that without some higher power, some higher consciousness, there's nothing we can do with the powerless we just admitted to. In other words, somehow we need to come out of ourselves. We need to include a higher power in the situation in which we are. And if we're declaring, help my unbelief, this is what we're doing. We're recognizing that there is a way out. And I know that that way involves God, that involves a higher power. And then, of course, step 3. Made a decision to turn my life over to the care of God as I understand God. Boom. This is the plan of action. So we've admitted to the problem. We know what the solution is. The solution is involving this higher power. And number 3, the plan of action is I made a decision. Do you hear that? I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand God. So, this is an important part of the process because we are declaring that if I make this decision and I continuously go back and make that decision over and over again, I am confident that with that decision I will be guided to help my unbelief. I will be guided to know and to understand and to realize and that all things are possible to them that believe. Right? And of course what we understand is that the Newtonian laws of motion tells us that a body that is in motion will keep in motion unless an outside force acts upon it. Right? So, if we're living an unconscious life, our life will continue in that trajectory unless some other force acts on it. In other words, the powerlessness that we have, the lack of faith that we have, the problems that we have will continue unless we do something different, unless some outside force or some conscious force is acted upon this. And so the force that alters the motion in this case is an inner force. It's an inner decision. So that third step, that plan of action is I made a decision. Oof. This is an act of will. This is a force acting upon my life. We know that the unexamined life, the unquestioned life, will not consider the deeper issues of life. But when we make a decision to turn our will and life over to the care of God, what we're doing is we're acting a tremendous force upon our life that will move our life in a new direction. And so, we could say that the one thing that we need to do, that plan of action, is to make a decision. Because this step 3, this plan of action, this decision that we make will entirely change our life so that we are guided to a whole new realm of existence. And this is no vain promise. It is the absolute truth. And so our lives are moving along. If we make this decision and we're really sincere about it, authentic, the plan of action is to include God more in our life, well then we're going to see results. it does require us to, from the heart, say, I am going to include more of God in my life. Now, we need to explore that. What does that mean for us? Okay? Emerson said the following: there is guidance for each of us, and by lowly listening we shall hear the right word. Certainly there is a right for you that needs no choice on your part. Place yourself in the middle of the stream of power and wisdom which flows into your life, and then without effort you are impelled to truth and to perfect contentment. So Emerson is telling us that by lowly listening, by putting ourselves in the stream of power and wisdom which flows into your life, what he's talking about is the meditative state, right? The prayer state, the state of consciousness in which we don't forget about our lives, but we go deeper into a realization of who and what we are. What Emerson is telling us is that we need to make this one decision, and then to give that decision some attention, some energy, some time, some devotion, some practice, to help that decision really take root. And so by stopping in life, by breathing deeply, or as Emerson says, by lowly listening, which is to open ourselves up to God, to take that walk in nature and open up your mind, your heart, that we're going to come into the stream of wisdom and life. We're going to understand things differently. We're going to see ourselves more deeply. And with that decision, we are confident that we'll be guided in the path that we need to take. Now, we need to ask ourselves, are we willing to do that? Do we really trust in God to do that? Well, let me offer you a little exercise, okay? Why don't you write down what God is and what God isn't to you, okay? Just independent of what you've been taught. What is God to you and what God is not? Put that on one sheet of paper. On the second sheet of paper, write down what you would like God to be. You know, in your imagination, what would you like God to be? Now, if God were everything to you that you wrote on that sheet of paper, would you be willing to turn your life over to the will and the power of God? Many of us would answer yes, because, you know, it's a God of my own imagination, right? I've just created the most perfect expression of God. Well, my recommendation to you is to throw away the first sheet and to keep the second sheet, because that is what God is to you. Then throughout the context of our daily living, we're challenged to turn it over to that God, the God that we would like God to be. Right? So we're continually asked to let go of our own personal control, our own personal perspective, and see things from a higher point of view. It requires constant surrender, constant giving way. Now, if we do make this decision, there is a warning, okay? And the warning is that if you decide to turn your life and your will over to God, what you will be shown is everything that needs to be healed, to be released, all of your smallness, all of your negativity, all of those shadow aspects of self will be revealed to you with the intention that they too be surrendered and turned over. Healed, we could say. Now, this is an important part of the process, because this is where most people either never get to or they detour away from, because it can be difficult. It can be painful. It can be very challenging to look at yourself at the deepest level and know and understand all of those shadow aspects, those weaknesses, those defects of character, the small-mindedness that we have. Those are hard to look at. But again, if we're willing to look at them, Work with acceptance, transcendence, knowing that we're more than what we see or that we feel, feeling the presence of God in that, welcoming all aspects of self into the banquet of our life. Well, we make that decision and it's going to help us move forward. Okay? Marianne Williamson says, we're willing to let God handle those things we don't care much about. But if something that we are really deeply invested in comes around, we better run it ourselves because we don't trust anybody else to do it right. Now that is insanity. That's a definition of just being crazy. You know, we're very happy to let God handle our breathing or the heart rate. We don't have to think about that. But if something we're really interested in, oh, well, I better take control of that. I take it into my personal will, my personal life, and then things turn out the way they always have, instead of the way that God's will would have it, at a higher expression, because we're not willing to let go. So today I'm inviting you to make this decision, right? Just like the 12 step says, well, we recognize the problem. My life has been going on a certain trajectory, right? Newton's law of motion is going to continue that way unless I do something different. So I'm doing something different. I'm declaring that I'm really powerless over changing that direction. But number two, I'm confident that there is a higher power that can restore me to wholeness, to sanity, to wonderful belief and faith and confidence in what God is in my life. And what is that plan of action? Make a decision. Make a decision. One decision to turn your life and your will over to the care of God. Now that one decision is probably a lifelong journey. Doesn't happen overnight, typically. We constantly will be growing in that. Oh, you know, we make that decision. We do the lowly listening that Emerson was talking about, coming into meditation. We see these different limiting beliefs come up. We attend to them. We see them for what they are. We go about releasing them, healing them, including them. All of these words that we use, we surrender that to the higher power within us. And we begin to see changes. Life becomes a little lighter. We can breathe deeper. We begin to see beauty and life all around us, little by little. And then, you know, we fall into another trap, another hole, and there we are again. Oh, we remember, okay, I need to, again, trust in God. I need to, you know, surrender, give way, turn it over. All these wonderful words. And then things open up again. And every time we do this, it's like the onion. We're going at a deeper level, deeper level, deeper level. And so today, I'm asking you to make that one decision, right? Make a decision for the will, the power of God in your life. Constantly, just turn it over, surrender it, give way. Let God's will be your will, right? Do that lowly listening. And whatever comes up, deal with it, right? Feel it, express it. Come to understand that you are a beloved child of God, created in the image and likeness of God, and that God is expressing in and through you. And then when you cry out, I do believe, but help my unbelief, right away you'll remember, oh gosh, okay, I'm declaring the problem. I'm remembering that higher power can restore me to sanity. I have faith in that. What's the plan of action? Make the decision again. Go deeper. Make the decision. Juan Enrique Toro greeting you on this day, thanking you for tuning in, and Thanking you for subscribing. Thumbs up. Thank you for those donations. The link to make a donation will be in the show notes. Thank you so much. Reminding you today and always, life is consciousness, and consciousness is life.